Hi guys, this is Vidya and I hope you're doing well. So this topic is something that a lot of moms worry about, and today I'm going to share with you some things that we do to raise a good eater. I mean, my son is still pretty young, but if I wait until he is 15 to share all this with you, your kids will be grown up as well. So the first tip is start early, which is why I'm doing this video. But start as early as you can, because eating habits are formed way earlier than most of us think, even before they start talking, even before they start, eating themselves. In fact, there are studies that show that even when you're pregnant, the taste of the food that you eat gets transferred to the amniotic fluid, and the baby also recognizes those tastes. But if you're not pregnant, if your child is already born, it doesn't mean that it's too late, obviously. But it's better to start earlier than later, because once those patterns are formed, it takes more effort to change them. So it's easier to make those healthier patterns from early on. Start as early as when you introduce your child to solids, like way before they start eating proper meals. My second tip is to encourage self-feeding from an early stage. Now, don't underestimate how much a child knows and understands even when they are an infant. So they pick up patterns like anything, and giving them control of what goes in their mouth and what they can pick up and choose is an important tool for, healthy eating habits later on. I know it's much easier to just feed a baby with a bowl of food, and just make sure that the bowl full of food goes into their belly. It gives us peace of mind that the child is not, hungry and they're getting their nutrition. But that's why you have to start early, because if you start before 1 year, the child is still getting their nutrition from breast milk or formula. So you don't have to worry too much about those extra calories from food. If we start later, after 1 year or after 2 years, then we have to worry about them getting enough nutrition. So I would say start when they're still less than 1 year old. Encourage them to start self-feeding. At this stage, the goal is just for them to explore the different textures and the tastes. So you can give them a range of foods that are healthy and that are, safe for self-feeding for an infant. You can look into baby-led weaning and look at what kinds of foods can be given at this stage. But once you lay out a few foods for them to choose from, they will pick out what they like, they will explore, they will mash it between their hands, but they are having the one-on-one experience with their food instead of just the food going into their belly without doing much. My next tip is to set a meal time. Now, I don't mean a meal time as in 1 o'clock lunch, 3 o'clock snack, 7 o'clock dinner, not like that, but whenever your child is eating, let them be aware of the fact that they're eating food, they're eating a meal, as opposed to getting distracted by toys or the TV or something. So typically at meal times, I will sit with him and we'll talk. Even if I'm not eating a meal, I will sit with him and chat. We'll talk about stuff, we'll talk about our day, we'll talk to our grandparents because they are not with us right now, so we FaceTime with them and we chat with them. So we do a lot of this social things when it is mealtime, instead of distracting ourselves with toys or books or TV or something like that. So mealtime is kind of a social affair in our home. What happens because of this? Like, it may not seem like a big deal now, but it helps the child know when they're full and when to stop eating, and that is a very key skill, knowing their hunger signals. So, you know how we don't eat the same amount of food every day, right? Sometimes we eat less, sometimes we eat more, and the same thing applies to children. They don't eat the same amount of food every day, but if we are feeding them every single day with a pre-measured bowl of food, our only goal is to get that food into their belly. So even if the child does not want to eat that much one day, the mother will kind of, do some tricks to just force it down the throat, just to make sure that the food gets in the belly. Now this messes up the child's inherent system of self-regulating. This may not seem like such a big deal when they're babies. Like, after all, they're babies, they're dependent on us, so we have to feed them. This is kind of the thinking of most moms, but especially Indian moms. But later on in their life, if they lose this self-regulating skill, they will depend on us to tell them when they're hungry. So we'll have to force them to come eat their food, or if they're eating too much, they won't know, like they've lost this power to self-regulate. So I think all of these little skills help them later on. The next thing I want to talk about is setting your expectations. This is so important. Like everything I've talked about in this video, I think is very, very important, but especially this one, because a lot of moms have a wrong idea of how much a child should eat. Your child will have different calorie requirements in different ages. Just because your child ate a bowl full of puree at 8 months does not mean that they're going to eat the same amount when they're 1.5 years. Like, you need healthy foods, like they need good nutrition, but the quantity they need is not always the same. You can talk to your pediatrician, they'll give you a lot of information, or you can look up online to get some resources, some really good studies that say that toddlers, eat less. They get picky between 1 to 3 years of age, and that's completely normal. It's not just your child. So as long as your child is growing well and is active, like being active is a key sign that tells you that your child is getting, good food. So the only thing that is in our control is what we give them, because they're still dependent on us for nutrition, right? So this builds on the previous points. Like, if you let your child self-feed, and if you let them learn the skill of self-regulating, learning their hunger signals, they will come to you when they're hungry and they will ask you for food, and that's when you have the power, you have the choice to give them a healthy, well-balanced, nutritious meal and lay it in front of them, and they will eat on their own. So that removes a huge stress from your mind if they're eating enough. So set your expectations right and check your assumptions. A lot of moms assume that their child is not getting enough and assume that they have to force feed their child in order for them to eat. But you have to understand that the child has a built-in mechanism that will not let them starve. It sounds like, harsh, but it is true. Human beings are meant to survive. We are built to survive. So your child will eat. My next tip is to check what foods you're bringing into the home. This is pretty obvious. You have to bring healthy foods. You have to avoid unhealthy foods at all costs. But especially if your child is less than 2 years of age, try to eliminate all, sugary foods, all foods which have too much salt in them, too much flavors especially. So then they'll know that food inherently has a lot of flavor. When I say avoid sugar, it does not mean avoid all sweet things, because fruits are extremely sweet. Milk is extremely sweet. We as adults become too dependent on these external taste enhancers to enjoy a meal, sugar, salt, flavors, spices. All of these things become too important, more important than the actual food itself. So when the children are brand new, let them explore these on their own, and let them first develop a taste for the food itself before adding on all of these things. That's what I think, so that they don't get dependent on these later on. Now, I don't mean that you should give them only bland food or put them on a strict diet without any flavors. I just want you guys to experiment with food that you're giving your child and let them develop their own sense of taste and not impose your own sense of taste. If you think something is too bland and you add a pinch of salt to your meal, it does not mean your child needs the same thing. If you give them control over what they're eating early on, they will start developing their own sense of taste, which is independent from yours, which is a very good thing. My last tip is to avoid labels. Now, don't take this too lightly, because we do it too often without even realizing it, which is when we're talking to other parents or other people, we tend to say things like, oh, my child is a picky eater, oh, my child does not eat that. Avoid saying those things, especially when your child is present, because they will pick up on it and they will reinforce those behaviors. Even if you think that your child is not listening to you, or they don't understand, they do. Believe me, they pick up on everything. And at this age, when they are like infants and when they are little toddlers, their sense of self, their sense of identity is so tied to yours that it is very hard for them to think independently. So they will just believe whatever you say about them. And don't label food as well. Like, we know that some foods are healthy and some foods are not, but the way we communicate that to our kids is like, many parents say, eat your vegetables and then you can have a cookie. So it gives the child the message that the vegetables are something you have to endure, something you have to tolerate in order to get a reward, which is the cookie. That's the kind of association we want to avoid, right? So you want them to enjoy all foods. You want them to enjoy the vegetables. You want them to enjoy a cookie as well. And the flip side to that is, if you avoid all junk food, if you say that cookies are bad and you're not going to eat them, then it becomes something forbidden. And when they go out, they will go out and eventually get access to cookies or whatever junk. They will not know when to stop, because it is so alluring to them that, that they lose that control of stopping themselves. So it becomes very tempting. It's up to us to kind of create a balance. It is quite delicate at times and it is quite stressful. I will not disagree with that. But then we have to trust our child. If we have given them healthy habits from day one, we have to trust that they will make those healthy, good choices in their life later on. So I hope this has reduced a little bit of stress for you when it comes to feeding your child. And let me know what you think are good habits, are good, things that you do to encourage your child to, be a healthy eater later on. And I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye.